Welcome to World History with Mr. Giese. In this episode, we will be discussing the events leading up to the end of World War I. At the end of this video, you'll be able to list the events leading up to American involvement into World War I, describe the turning point for the Allied powers in Europe, and understand the impact of the Treaty of Versailles. Prior to the United States becoming involved in World War I, the U.S. followed a strict policy of isolationism. They felt as if the Great War was a European affair and the U.S. should stay out of it. In fact, that Wilson kept the United States out of the war was one of the reasons why he won re-election. However, as isolated as the United States wanted to be, there were several connections to the Allied powers economically that would not allow that forever. One reason for U.S. involvement was the tactic of unrestricted submarine warfare that Germany used against any of the Allied powers or those supplying them. When the Lusitania was attacked and sunk, with Americans on board, the U.S. government complained to the Germans about the loss of American lives. The Germans didn't want the Americans in the war, so they backed off, but it did bring the United States one step closer to war. The next big event was that of the Zimmermann Note in 1917. This was a secret message from a German diplomat that proposed if Mexico attacked the U.S., they would give them land that once was theirs, being the states of Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. This would help keep the United States out of the war in Europe. This upset the Americans, and many called for war against Germany. This, and strong financial ties to Great Britain and the Allied powers, led the United States to enter war on the side of the Allied powers. The Germans knew the United States' involvement would change the war in Europe. So, before the United States arrived, they needed to deal with the Allied powers a decisive blow. This became a bit easier when the Russians left the war in 1917. They had issues of revolutions and civil war and became less involved with the war. The Germans could now focus their resources and soldiers on the West. However, the momentum shifted in the Allies' favor. Starting with the Second Battle of the Marne, the Allied forces started to turn the tide in their favor. They were able to use tanks and aircraft to push the Germans back and take territory from them. Many Germans surrendered, and in 1918, German leaders were looking for an armistice, or truce. Now the issue was not about fighting, it was about how to deal with Europe after the war. At the Treaty of Versailles, two schools of thought emerged: punish Germany or advocate for world peace. The side that wanted to punish Germany, led by France, wanted to prevent Germany from starting another global war. The other side, looking for world peace, came up with the 14 Points Plan led by the United States and President Woodrow Wilson. Ultimately, the side that wanted to punish Germany won out. The Treaty of Versailles came up with these terms. Full blame for the war was placed on Germany. Germany was ordered to pay war reparations, and land that once belonged to France and Russia that was conquered by Germany was taken away. The 14 Points Plan did not work, but the idea of a League of Nations was included. The League's main goals were to encourage cooperation between nations and keep peace. The United States Senate did not approve the treaty, and the United States, therefore, was not a part of the League. They were worried that it would drag them into another war. Economically, Europe would not be the same. The countries that once led the world were replaced by the United States and Japan. Farmland and cities throughout Europe were devastated, and these countries in the world would now start trying to rebuild their struggling nations.